Have you ever wondered what it truly takes to become confident? To step into your power, trust yourself, and take risks even when fear is screaming in your ear? Welcome to The Confidence Code: How to Build Confidence Through Action, full audiobook. Today, we follow Emma's journey, a woman who transforms hesitation into courage, self-doubt into resilience, and small steps into life-changing confidence. Stay with us as we explore how action, reflection, and trust in yourself can unlock the confidence within you. Before we start, please help the channel grow by subscribing and liking this video. Your support allows us to bring more inspiring stories and practical lessons directly to you. Confidence Code: How to Build Confidence Through Action. Chapter 1. Shadows of Doubt. Emma's alarm went off at exactly 6:30 a.m., but she lay in bed for a few minutes longer, staring at the ceiling, replaying yesterday's meeting in her mind. Every time she thought of it, she could still hear her inner voice whispering, "You shouldn't have said anything. What if they laughed at your idea?" She shifted uncomfortably beneath her blanket, the familiar weight of self-doubt pressing on her chest. It was exhausting, almost invisible, like carrying an invisible backpack full of bricks that no one else could see. Eventually, she swung her legs over the side of the bed and rubbed her eyes, staring into the bathroom mirror. Her reflection looked tired, but not unattractive, yet somehow, in the reflection, Emma only saw her flaws. She scrutinized the slight puffiness under her eyes and the subtle crease in her forehead. More than her appearance, though, it was the hesitation, the uncertainty in her posture, in her gaze, that gnawed at her. She fidgeted with her hair, smoothing a strand that had escaped its bun, as though adjusting her outward appearance could somehow straighten her inner self. Her phone buzzed on the counter. An email from her boss. Her stomach fluttered. The subject line was simple: "Thoughts on the Thompson project?" Her first reaction was panic. What if her ideas weren't good enough? What if she embarrassed herself by speaking up? She knew the project's success depended on creative input from everyone, but the thought of presenting anything felt unbearable. Emma dressed in muted tones, avoiding the vibrant scarf she liked because it might draw attention. She opted for a safe navy blouse and gray slacks, blending into the office crowd. Her reflection in the mirror seemed almost to nod at her choice, approving her invisibility. Breakfast was quick, a granola bar she barely tasted, while her mind replayed all the possible mistakes she could make that day. By the time she stepped onto the street, the city was alive with movement. People hustled past her, confident and seemingly unafraid. She observed a woman on the sidewalk negotiating with a street vendor, her voice calm but assertive, gesturing naturally as if the world belonged to her. Emma couldn't help but notice the contrast between herself and that woman. How can someone be so bold? She wondered. I could never ask for anything like that. I'd be terrified of being judged, of being wrong. On the subway, Emma's gaze wandered to the people around her. A man was talking on speakerphone, giving a presentation to his team with practiced authority. A young woman carried herself with such ease and purpose that Emma felt an almost painful mix of admiration and envy. It's like they don't have these doubts, like I do, she thought. Maybe confidence is just genetic. Some people are born with it, and the rest of us have to settle for quiet shadows. Yet, even as she thought that, a small spark flickered. She noticed how small risks were part of these people's lives. The street vendor negotiator, the confident speaker, even the woman who walked past without hesitation, they acted despite uncertainty. That tiny observation planted a seed in Emma's mind. Maybe it's not about being born confident. Maybe it's about doing something, even if it's scary. At work, Emma's office felt like a familiar cage. She watched her colleagues settle into their routines. Vanessa, her confident coworker, breezed past her desk, her heels clicking sharply on the floor. Vanessa's air of certainty irritated Emma and made her acutely aware of her own hesitations. Vanessa seemed to speak without fear of judgment, while Emma's thoughts always circled back to the what-ifs. The team meeting began. Emma sat with her hands folded, heart thumping, as the discussion swirled around the room. Ideas were tossed casually, with colleagues occasionally laughing at witty remarks. When the floor came to her, she froze for a moment, fingers clutching the edge of the table. She had an idea, small, practical, but the fear of being wrong held her back. Vanessa raised her hand confidently, presenting her plan for a new approach to the project. The team nodded appreciatively, and Emma felt a familiar pang of regret for not speaking first. Yet, something shifted within her. Just for a fraction of a second, she remembered the spark from the morning, that observation of people acting despite fear. Maybe she could try, just a little, today. When the discussion moved to workflow adjustments, Emma took a breath and tentatively raised her hand. I think we could try adjusting the schedule slightly. It might help reduce bottlenecks. Her voice sounded fragile to her own ears, but she said it. The room paused for a moment, then nodded. A colleague smiled softly. Vanessa's smirk was unreadable, but that didn't matter. Emma felt a flicker of something new, a faint thrill of accomplishment, an unfamiliar sense of empowerment. Lunchtime arrived, and Emma found herself in a small cafe, notebook open in front of her. She wrote, "I spoke today. Tiny, but I did it. Maybe I can do more tomorrow." The words felt like a small victory, a quiet but firm step forward. Around her, the cafe buzzed with chatter, but she noticed more people taking action, engaging with the world confidently. She realized that confidence didn't have to be inherent, it could be learned, grown, nurtured. And it began, she thought, with small actions taken even when fear was present. In the afternoon, Emma faced her first real challenge of the day, a client call where she would need to share her perspective. She felt her pulse quicken, her palms grow damp, but she focused on the task. When the opportunity came, she spoke clearly, suggesting a new workflow approach she had been considering. There were minor stumbles, she hesitated over one point, misphrased another, but she continued, finishing her contribution with composure. The client responded positively, and her team exchanged approving glances. As she packed her bag to leave work, Emma felt a quiet shift inside. Today had not been perfect, but it had been a beginning. For the first time in months, or perhaps years, she felt the smallest trace of self-trust. She had acted despite fear, taken risks in manageable doses, and realized that each step, no matter how tiny, contributed to the foundation of confidence. Walking home, the city felt different, less intimidating. Emma noticed a woman on the street gesturing animatedly to a taxi driver, and instead of envy, Emma felt a flicker of recognition. She could be like that. She could take action, step into risk, and trust herself. It wouldn't happen all at once, but she would start here, with today's small steps, and continue building from there. She arrived at her apartment, set down her bag, and lingered by the window, gazing at the city skyline. A thought crossed her mind: tomorrow, I will try something slightly bigger. I will keep moving, even if I am afraid. That is what confidence feels like, even if I can't see it yet. With that resolve, she felt a small but powerful warmth, a quiet courage rising within her, enough to know that the journey had begun. Chapter 2. The mentor appears. Emma walked into the office lounge with the familiar weight of hesitation pressing on her shoulders. The morning's meeting still lingered in her mind, her timid suggestion, barely noticed, and the pang of regret that followed. She poured her coffee slowly, trying to steady her hands, feeling the warmth of the mug anchor her in the present. Across the room, Claire moved with an ease that made Emma's uncertainty even more tangible. Claire's presence was quietly commanding, the kind of confidence that didn't need to speak to be noticed. Emma found herself drawn into Claire's orbit without realizing it. The older woman navigated the room with effortless attention, greeting colleagues with gentle smiles and gestures that seemed natural, effortless. Emma, by contrast, was acutely aware of her own hesitation. She watched Claire's movements, the way she balanced purpose with calm observation, and for the first time, considered that confidence might be something that could be learned, rather than a trait assigned at birth. Later that morning, Claire suggested Emma join her for lunch, and though her mind screamed reasons not to, she didn't know what to say. She might embarrass herself. Emma felt a faint pull, a curiosity she hadn't allowed herself to explore in months. She accepted, surprising herself with the ease of the decision. It felt like a small risk, and she realized that small risks had the power to change everything, if she allowed them. The cafe was warm and bustling, and Emma followed Claire inside, noticing the subtle details she usually overlooked, the way Claire carried herself, the calm way she ordered her food, the ease with which she interacted with the cashier. Emma felt an internal tug to imitate that confidence, but it was awkward at first, tentative. She reminded herself of the morning's lesson: action comes first, ease comes later. She settled into the seat across from Claire, observing without judgment, absorbing more than any conversation could teach. Emma reflected on her own habits: hesitation, overthinking, the constant replay of what-if scenarios. She had always believed that confidence was about never failing, about having all the right answers before stepping forward. Seeing Claire operate with effortless assurance, making mistakes gracefully and continuing anyway, revealed a different truth: confidence was built through experience, through action, and through trusting oneself to navigate uncertainty. By mid-afternoon, Emma had begun applying the lesson in small, deliberate ways. A minor team discussion presented an opportunity, and though her hands trembled and her heart raced, she spoke up. The suggestion she offered was simple, practical, and unpolished, but it mattered. The acknowledgement from her colleagues, subtle though it was, filled her with an unfamiliar warmth, a faint glimmer of empowerment. It wasn't about triumph or perfection, it was about proving to herself that she could act despite fear. Returning to her desk, Emma opened her notebook, as she had begun to do each day, and captured the morning's discoveries in writing. She noted the tension in her chest that eased slightly when she acted, the racing thoughts that became quieter with each deliberate step. Reflection reinforced the lesson: confidence was not an innate trait but a skill, nurtured through repeated actions that challenged fear. She wrote, "I spoke today. It was small, but I acted. Tomorrow I will try something slightly bigger." The city streets felt different as she walked home. The people around her, the movements and interactions, no longer seemed intimidating. They were examples, living proof that bold action was possible. Emma noticed a woman confidently negotiating with a taxi driver, a group of friends laughing without hesitation in a cafe, a delivery man managing chaos with practiced calm. Each action, each risk taken, was a quiet lesson. Emma understood that her own confidence could be cultivated in the same way, one deliberate step at a time. That evening, as she settled into bed, Emma allowed herself a rare moment of stillness. The day had been small in scope but monumental in meaning. She had acted despite fear, experienced the subtle power of risk-taking, and felt the beginnings of self-trust emerge from the uncertainty. It was only the beginning, and she knew the path ahead would be challenging, filled with setbacks and doubts. But for the first time in months, Emma felt a flicker of possibility. Confidence, she realized, was not something she would stumble upon. It was something she would build, deliberately, step by step, with courage and persistence as her guides. Chapter 3. Small Risks, Big Lessons. The next morning, Emma woke with a quiet determination that felt foreign yet exhilarating. The alarm rang at 6:30 a.m., but she didn't lie in bed replaying yesterday's hesitations. Instead, she sat up, stretched, and took a slow, deliberate breath. She thought about the subtle shift in her mindset that had begun the day before, the realization that confidence was not a permanent state, but a skill to be cultivated, step by step. Her morning routine was familiar, yet Emma approached it differently. She chose her outfit deliberately, not to blend in, but to feel composed. A soft green blouse, paired with black slacks, gave her a sense of quiet authority. She looked at her reflection, noting the slight crease between her brows and the tension in her shoulders, but instead of focusing on flaws, she acknowledged them without judgment. She had acted yesterday, she reminded herself. She could act today. Walking through the city streets, Emma observed the world with new eyes. The confident ease of strangers no longer intimidated her. A barista greeted a customer with warmth and assertiveness, a woman negotiated a taxi fare without hesitation. These small acts were not grand feats, but Emma realized they were demonstrations of courage in everyday life, risks taken without guarantee of success. She considered how she could incorporate similar deliberate actions into her day. At the office, Emma's mentor Claire was already at her desk. She didn't need to speak to convey assurance. Her posture, the calm way she moved, and the subtle nods of recognition to colleagues spoke volumes. Emma felt a pang of nervousness as she approached, but it was tempered by a growing sense of possibility. Confidence, she reminded herself, was built through action, not perfection. The morning was filled with small but deliberate risks. Emma volunteered to summarize a section of a project during a team meeting, a task that would have seemed impossible a week ago. Her hands trembled as she held her notes, but she forced herself to meet the eyes of her colleagues and speak clearly. The words were simple, yet they carried weight because she had chosen to act. She stumbled briefly over a statistic but recovered, and the team acknowledged her contribution with polite smiles and nods. Emma retreated to her desk, feeling the familiar mix of relief and exhilaration. She noted in her journal the physical sensations she had experienced, the fluttering in her chest, the tightness in her stomach, the rapid beating of her heart. She realized that the intensity of these feelings didn't prevent her from acting, in fact, they were markers of growth. She had taken a calculated risk and lived to see the small reward, a subtle increase in her self-trust. The afternoon brought a new opportunity, a brainstorming session with a client who had a reputation for being critical. Emma's initial impulse was to remain silent, to let her ideas stay locked in her notebook. She felt the familiar hesitation, the mental rehearsal of every possible misstep. Yet, she remembered Claire's words, confidence is acting despite fear. Confidence grows through repetition, reflection, and trust in your judgment. When the moment arrived, Emma spoke. Her suggestion was measured, practical, and presented with a tentative confidence she hadn't known she possessed. The client responded thoughtfully, asking follow-up questions. Emma's heart raced, but she stayed composed. She wasn't perfect, her phrasing could have been smoother, her timing better, but the important thing was that she had acted. She had risked exposure to critique and emerged intact, with her self-trust intact. After the client left, Emma allowed herself a rare moment of reflection. She closed her eyes and noted the subtle but significant difference in her internal state. Action, she realized, had a cumulative effect. Every small risk taken, every step beyond her comfort zone, strengthened her ability to trust herself. She wrote in her journal, "I acted today. It was imperfect, but I proved to myself I can handle discomfort. Each small risk makes the next one easier." Evening came, and Emma walked home through the golden glow of the city streets. The ordinary sights, the street performers, the commuters, the vendors, felt infused with possibility. Each person she observed taking a small risk reminded her that courage was not reserved for the extraordinary, it was present in everyday acts, in choices to act despite fear. She thought about the challenges she might face tomorrow and smiled softly. The day had been a series of small experiments, each one a building block in the architecture of her confidence. As she prepared for bed, Emma reflected on her growth. The previous day had taught her that confidence begins with a single act. Today had shown her that repeated, deliberate acts, no matter how small, compounded into a sense of self-trust and capability. Fear had not disappeared, it never would. But fear had become a signal, a marker of opportunity rather than an obstacle. She felt a quiet pride, the kind that comes not from external recognition, but from knowing she had acted despite her doubts. Before sleep claimed her, Emma made a commitment to herself. Tomorrow, she would take another step, perhaps a bit larger, perhaps a bit more daring. She would continue to experiment, to test the boundaries of her comfort, and to build the internal foundation of courage that would sustain her in moments that mattered. Confidence, she realized, was not a destination but a journey she was now willing to undertake, one small risk at a time. Chapter 4. Mirrors of Confidence. The morning light filtered through the office windows, spilling across Emma's desk and casting long, warm shadows. She arrived early, a deliberate act she had started practicing, a small way to take control of her day. The air smelled faintly of coffee and polished wood, the quiet hum of computers filling the space. Emma's mind lingered on the patterns she had begun to notice in herself, her hesitations, her cautious movements, and, more importantly, the sparks of courage that had begun to flicker. Across the room, Vanessa moved with her usual ease, a perfect example of the confidence Emma had long envied. Vanessa spoke quickly, punctuating her sentences with gestures that drew attention and conveyed certainty. She didn't wait for validation, she projected belief in herself so convincingly that others often followed without question. Emma had observed her countless times and often left meetings with a lingering ache of inadequacy. But now, she felt something new, curiosity. Emma studied Vanessa's posture, her gestures, the cadence of her speech. She noted how Vanessa maintained eye contact without strain, how she allowed pauses for others to respond, and how she leaned slightly forward when making a point, a subtle claim of authority. Emma realized that confidence was not some mystical gift, it was a collection of behaviors, choices, and small habits that could be observed, studied, and practiced. During the morning meeting, Emma allowed herself to experiment. She didn't try to mimic Vanessa entirely, instead, she incorporated small elements she could manage. She maintained steady eye contact while presenting a minor update, spoke a touch more assertively, and used brief gestures to emphasize her points. The room responded, not with overwhelming attention, but with acknowledgement. Each subtle success reinforced the principle she had been learning: confidence was visible in behavior, not innate ability. Later, as she walked through the office, Emma noticed other colleagues taking bold steps in everyday situations. A junior associate approached a manager with a proposal, speaking with a quiet but firm certainty. A peer volunteered to lead a project component, projecting calm enthusiasm. Emma understood that these were not isolated acts of brilliance, they were deliberate exercises in confidence, accumulated through repeated action. Each small choice to act, each minor risk taken, was a building block for self-trust. At her desk, Emma reflected on the morning. She realized that observing others did more than teach her techniques, it reframed her understanding of herself. Confidence was not a fixed trait, unattainable or inherited. It was a skill, one she could cultivate with awareness, practice, and deliberate action. She jotted notes in her journal, capturing her insights: confidence can be modeled. I can practice the behaviors that create it. Small steps matter more than perfection. The afternoon brought another opportunity to apply these observations. A team brainstorming session was underway, and the discussion had stalled. Emma felt the familiar tug of hesitation, but she remembered the people she had been watching, their willingness to step forward despite uncertainty. She took a slow breath and offered a suggestion, phrasing it carefully yet assertively. The idea was practical and modest, but it shifted the energy in the room. Colleagues leaned in, asked questions, and built upon her contribution. Emma felt a surge of quiet pride. The risk of speaking had been present, but she had acted anyway. Observing others had not only provided a model, it had prepared her to test herself, to practice courage in manageable doses. She noted the feeling in her chest, the subtle warmth of accomplishment, and the steadying effect of deliberate action. By the end of the day, Emma's internal dialogue had begun to shift. The old voice of self-doubt still lingered, cautioning her about potential missteps and judgment. But a new voice was emerging, a voice that acknowledged fear, recognized risk, and chose action anyway. She walked home with a sense of momentum, aware that each small risk, each observed behavior, and each deliberate act reinforced her growing self-trust. The city streets glimmered with fading sunlight, and Emma noticed the ordinary courage around her, a vendor negotiating with a customer, a woman leading a group of children across a busy street, a man approaching a stranger to ask a question. These everyday acts, once invisible, now stood out as examples of deliberate action. Emma understood that she was part of this continuum. Courage was not extraordinary, it was built, practiced, and visible in the smallest decisions. That evening, as Emma prepared for bed, she reflected on her day's lessons. Confidence was no longer an abstract ideal, it was a living process, one she could engage with deliberately. Observation, modeling, and application were powerful tools, and each small action reinforced the belief that she could act, risk, and trust herself. She made a mental note for tomorrow: she would continue to experiment, push slightly beyond her comfort zone, and integrate the lessons she had observed into her own behaviors. Before sleep claimed her, Emma felt the quiet thrill of possibility. Each day, each deliberate action, each risk taken, no matter how small, was shaping her. The reflection in the mirror no longer felt like a stranger, it was becoming someone capable, someone willing to act despite fear. Confidence, she realized, was not something she could wait for, it was something she built, one observable, practiced step at a time. Chapter 5. Listening Within. The office was quiet when Emma arrived that morning, the soft hum of computers and the faint scent of coffee creating a familiar rhythm. Unlike previous mornings, she felt a subtle steadiness in her chest, a quiet readiness to face the day. The previous weeks had taught her the value of small risks, observation, and deliberate action, but today she was determined to focus inward, to listen to the voice within that had long been drowned out by hesitation and self-doubt. Her first hours were spent reviewing project notes and client feedback. She noticed how her thoughts often wandered to what others might think of her ideas, the familiar specter of judgment, but instead of letting it dominate her mind, she paused and observed it. She wrote a quick note in her journal: "Fear is natural, but it doesn't control me. I can act anyway." The simple acknowledgement of fear, without judgment, felt empowering. It was the first step in trusting herself. During the morning meeting, Emma consciously practiced this inner listening. When discussion turned toward a challenging problem, she allowed herself to notice her initial reactions: hesitation, uncertainty, a flicker of doubt. But instead of retreating, she focused on her instincts, the small hints of solutions forming quietly in her mind. When the opportunity arose, she shared her idea. It was modest, but it was hers, thoughtful, practical, and infused with the quiet assurance of someone who had paused to listen before speaking. The response from her colleagues was measured but positive. One or two followed up with questions, and another nodded appreciatively. The acknowledgement was subtle, yet it resonated deeply with Emma. Speaking from her inner conviction, rather than performing for external approval, felt different. It carried weight, not because of the reaction it provoked, but because it came from a place of authenticity and self-trust. After the meeting, Emma took a walk to clear her mind. The city streets were alive with motion, street vendors calling out their wares, commuters weaving between sidewalks, a group of students laughing in the park. She noticed the way some individuals moved with natural assurance, while others hesitated, constrained by self-doubt or fear of judgment. Observing both, Emma understood a new layer of confidence. It was not merely about action, it was about aligning action with inner guidance. Listening to oneself before acting made courage more sustainable, less exhausting. Back at her desk, Emma spent time journaling, recording not only what she did but how she felt internally. She noted moments when she had trusted her instincts, when she had spoken or acted without overanalyzing. She reflected on moments of hesitation, considering what her fear had taught her and how she could navigate it next time. Her journal became a map of progress, a tangible record of self-trust being built through repeated, deliberate action. The afternoon brought a test of a different kind. A client issue arose that required a quick solution. Emma felt the familiar flutter of anxiety, the racing thoughts predicting failure, embarrassment, and critique. But this time, she didn't retreat. Instead, she paused, took a deep breath, and listened to her instincts. She proposed a course of action based on her observations and experience, not on the imagined judgments of others. The client's response was positive, appreciative of her clarity and initiative. For the first time, Emma felt the profound satisfaction of trusting herself under pressure. As the day drew to a close, Emma reflected on the quiet victories she had accumulated. Each act of listening within, each decision to trust herself despite fear, had strengthened the foundation of her confidence. She understood that action alone was not enough. Action informed by inner guidance and reflection created a depth of self-trust that could sustain her through greater challenges. Walking home in the evening, Emma felt the city differently. The familiar bustle was no longer overwhelming, it was a canvas of possibility. Every interaction, every decision to step forward, carried the potential to reinforce her growing sense of self. She noticed the subtle courage of strangers, someone asking a stranger for directions, a vendor negotiating with a hesitant customer, and recognized the universality of courage in small, deliberate acts. That night, as she prepared for bed, Emma allowed herself to feel the quiet pride of progress. Fear remained, as it always would, but it no longer dictated her choices. She made a mental note for tomorrow: continue to act, continue to listen, continue to trust. Each day, each deliberate risk, each reflection on inner guidance was constructing a confidence that was resilient, grounded, and uniquely hers. Emma fell asleep with a soft smile, aware that she was no longer merely reacting to the world. She was engaging with it intentionally, guided by her inner voice and strengthened by her growing self-trust. Confidence, she realized, was not a sudden revelation but a series of conscious choices she was now determined to make, again and again. Chapter 6. Stepping Beyond. Emma woke that morning with a mixture of anticipation and tension. The previous weeks had been a careful dance of observation, reflection, and small deliberate actions. Each step had built a foundation of self-trust, but today would test how far that foundation could hold. A major client meeting awaited, a high-stakes project that demanded not only competence but assertiveness and initiative. She dressed with care, choosing a deep burgundy blouse that made her feel grounded and professional. As she examined her reflection, she noted the familiar tightness in her chest and the flutter in her stomach. The old instinct would have urged her to retreat, to keep her ideas to herself, to avoid drawing attention. But a quiet inner voice reminded her of the cumulative lessons she had learned. Confidence was built by acting despite fear, by trusting herself, and by observing how deliberate behaviors could shape outcomes. Walking through the city streets, Emma felt the pulse of movement around her, not as a threat, but as a mirror. People navigated challenges, negotiated, took small risks every day. She imagined herself moving with similar quiet assurance, letting the nervous energy fuel focus rather than paralysis. She arrived at the office early, reviewing her notes one final time, mentally rehearsing her points, but not obsessing over perfection. Today was not about flawless execution, it was about courage in action. The client meeting began, a room of attentive eyes and subtle expectations. Emma felt the familiar tremor of hesitation but pushed past it. She listened carefully as others presented, noting opportunities to contribute meaningfully. When a natural opening appeared, she spoke. Her voice was steady, her words deliberate, carrying not only ideas but a confidence rooted in preparation and self-trust. The room responded differently than in her past experiences. Colleagues nodded thoughtfully, and the client asked clarifying questions that allowed Emma to expand on her ideas. There were moments of tension, when her suggestion was challenged, but she stayed grounded, responding with clarity rather than defensiveness. Each exchange reinforced the principle she had been practicing: confidence was not the absence of fear or opposition, but the ability to act with composure and trust in one's judgment. After the meeting, Emma returned to her desk, a rush of exhilaration mingled with fatigue. The day had demanded more than previous small risks. It had required courage under pressure, the ability to act decisively, and the willingness to accept critique without letting it undermine her self-trust. She opened her journal and wrote, "I stepped further today. I acted under pressure. I trusted myself, even when challenged. Each act builds a foundation I can rely on." The afternoon offered more opportunities to test her growth. A spontaneous discussion arose about project strategy, and Emma, noticing a chance to contribute, shared her perspective without hesitation. The response was respectful and engaging, further cementing her growing confidence. She realized that each bold choice compounded her ability to act with assurance in future situations. Confidence was not a single moment of triumph, it was a series of deliberate, accumulated actions. Walking home that evening, the city seemed to hum with possibility. Emma noticed courage in its ordinary forms: a vendor negotiating with a difficult customer, a cyclist weaving confidently through traffic, a group of friends presenting a proposal to a nearby community organization. Each act, visible yet unremarkable, mirrored her own journey. Confidence, she understood, was not reserved for extraordinary feats. It was crafted in everyday choices, in measured risks, in trust cultivated over time. At home, she reflected on the day's lessons. The stakes had been higher, the risks more pronounced, yet she had acted with integrity and clarity. She allowed herself to feel the quiet thrill of accomplishment, not as validation from others, but as a testament to her own growth. Fear remained, as it always would, but it no longer dictated her actions. It became a signal, a reminder that meaningful progress often accompanies discomfort. That night, Emma set a new intention: tomorrow, she would continue to challenge herself, seeking moments that stretched her abilities, reinforced her self-trust, and deepened her resilience. Confidence, she realized, was not an endpoint, it was a journey, measured in repeated choices, deliberate actions, and a steadfast commitment to trust herself, even in the face of uncertainty. Chapter 7. The Test of Resilience. The week began with promise, and Emma felt a quiet sense of momentum. The high-stakes client meeting of the previous chapter had reinforced her growing self-trust, and she approached the office with the steady determination of someone who had learned the value of deliberate action. Yet, as she arrived, she sensed that growth would soon be measured not by small victories but by how she handled unexpected setbacks. Mid-morning, an urgent email arrived. A project she had been overseeing for weeks contained a critical error, one she had overlooked despite careful preparation. Emma's stomach twisted, a familiar wave of anxiety washing over her. The weight of responsibility pressed down, and for a moment, she felt paralyzed. The inner voice of self-doubt whispered, "You're not ready. You can't handle this. You failed." For a moment, she allowed herself to breathe, acknowledging the fear without judgment. The lessons of the past weeks returned to her. Confidence was not the absence of fear, but the ability to act despite it. Self-trust was built through deliberate engagement, not avoidance. Emma reminded herself that setbacks were not final judgments on her capabilities, they were opportunities to grow, to act with integrity, and to learn. She gathered the necessary documents, reviewing every detail with focused attention. Each line, each calculation, each client requirement was scrutinized. The error was traced, a solution devised, and a plan of action formulated. Emma composed an email to the client, outlining the corrective measures with clarity and honesty. Her hands trembled slightly as she hit send, but she did not pause to second-guess herself. The action, deliberate and conscientious, was more important than perfection. The client's response came within the hour, a calm acknowledgement, appreciation for the transparency, and a willingness to proceed with the revised plan. Relief washed over Emma, accompanied by a quiet pride. She had acted under pressure, confronted failure, and navigated it with composure. The experience reinforced a deeper lesson: resilience was inseparable from confidence. Confidence was not merely about success, it was about persistence, adaptation, and the willingness to act in the face of mistakes. Later that afternoon, Emma faced another challenge. During a team discussion, a colleague criticized her approach to a task, questioning her judgment in front of others. Her immediate impulse was defensiveness, a desire to retreat into silence. Instead, she paused, taking a deep breath and centering herself. She listened carefully, separating the critique from personal judgment, and responded thoughtfully. She acknowledged valid points, offered clarification where needed, and suggested a constructive alternative. The exchange was not easy. Her heart raced, and her palms were damp with anxiety. But she noticed a shift within herself. Fear had not frozen her. She had acted with awareness, trust in her judgment, and a commitment to integrity. The interaction ended with mutual understanding and renewed collaboration, leaving Emma with a profound sense of self-efficacy. Returning to her desk, Emma reflected on the day's lessons. Setbacks, failures, and criticism were inevitable, she realized, but their impact depended on her response. Each moment of deliberate action in the face of discomfort strengthened her resilience and, in turn, her confidence. She wrote in her journal, "Mistakes do not define me. Acting despite fear and learning from outcomes defines me." Resilience and confidence are intertwined. As evening approached, Emma walked home under a sky streaked with pink and gold. The city, alive with its ordinary chaos, felt different, less intimidating, more a canvas for deliberate action. She noticed subtle examples of resilience in others: a street performer adapting to a sudden downpour, a vendor calmly resolving a customer complaint, a cyclist navigating a crowded street with steady focus. Emma understood that courage was not always dramatic, it was often the quiet endurance, the measured response to challenges, and the ability to continue despite fear. That night, as she prepared for bed, Emma felt a deep sense of growth. The day had tested her in ways that small successes never could. She had faced errors, criticism, and self-doubt, yet she had acted with integrity, reflection, and trust in herself. Confidence, she realized, was not a shield against difficulty, it was the skill to navigate difficulty with resilience and composure. She made a quiet promise to herself: tomorrow, she would continue to embrace challenges, to act deliberately, and to trust herself even when outcomes were uncertain. Confidence, Emma understood, was not a destination, it was a practice, a daily commitment to courage, resilience, and self-trust. And with each deliberate action, she was becoming not only more confident but stronger, steadier, and more fully herself. Chapter 8: Leading by Example. The office felt different that morning. Emma arrived with a quiet anticipation, noticing how her perspective had shifted over the past weeks. The small risks, deliberate actions, and reflections had gradually transformed the way she experienced her work and interactions. Confidence was no longer an abstract goal, it was a living skill she applied daily. Today, she would explore another dimension of it, guiding and influencing others. Her first opportunity appeared in a team meeting. A junior colleague struggled to present a project update, stumbling over words and retreating under the weight of imagined judgment. Emma noticed the tension in the room, how the colleague's uncertainty mirrored the feelings she herself had once carried. Without thinking, she leaned forward slightly and offered a quiet, encouraging suggestion. It wasn't a directive or correction, but a guiding nudge, a way to empower the other person without undermining their autonomy. The colleague's expression softened, and a tentative smile appeared. Emma observed the subtle shift, the release of tension that came from being supported rather than criticized. She realized that confidence was contagious, it could be shared and reinforced through thoughtful action. By modeling composure, trust, and deliberate engagement, she could help others navigate their own uncertainties. Later in the day, another opportunity presented itself. A collaborative project required coordinating between teams, and Emma volunteered to take the lead. She felt the familiar stirrings of anxiety, the mental rehearsal of all possible pitfalls, but she also recognized the internal growth she had cultivated. She approached the task deliberately, communicating clearly, listening actively, and balancing assertiveness with empathy. Her leadership was neither flawless nor performative, it was grounded in authenticity. Mistakes were inevitable, but she addressed them openly, modeling resilience and self-trust for the team. The experience reinforced a new dimension of confidence. It was not only about acting courageously for oneself, but about creating space for others to do the same. Leadership, Emma realized, was the extension of personal confidence into social influence. As the day progressed, Emma continued to notice the subtle ways confidence rippled through her actions. She offered guidance when appropriate, celebrated small successes, and reframed challenges as opportunities for growth. Her colleagues responded with trust and engagement, creating an atmosphere where initiative and reflection were valued. Each interaction reinforced her own self-trust, while simultaneously nurturing the confidence of those around her. Walking home that evening, Emma reflected on the interconnectedness of confidence. It was not a solitary pursuit, it was relational, visible in the way she influenced others through example. Her previous lessons, acting despite fear, trusting her inner guidance, and responding resiliently to setbacks, had prepared her to extend confidence outward. She understood that courage and self-trust could inspire, and that leadership was an act of deliberate, practiced confidence. At home, she wrote in her journal, "Confidence grows in action, but it blooms in influence. By guiding others, I reinforce my own trust." Leadership is not about perfection, it is about presence, courage, and authenticity. The realization deepened her sense of purpose and reinforced the cycle of growth she had been cultivating. That night, Emma allowed herself to savor the quiet satisfaction of the day. She had acted with courage, reflected deeply, and now extended her confidence outward to others. The journey was far from over, but she felt a profound sense of alignment between her actions, values, and inner guidance. Confidence, she knew, was not a fixed destination, it was a living, relational practice, strengthened by each choice to act, trust, and support. As she drifted to sleep, Emma anticipated the days ahead, aware that new challenges would test her in ways she could not yet predict. Yet she felt grounded, steady, and capable. Each deliberate action, each moment of reflection, and each act of guidance had constructed a foundation stronger than fear, more reliable than doubt. She was no longer merely learning confidence, she was embodying it, shaping not only herself but the world around her. Chapter 9, The Crucible. The morning air felt heavier than usual as Emma walked to the office. Today was different. A high-profile project, months in the making, was about to be presented to executives and key clients. The stakes were high, and the consequences of missteps were tangible. She felt the familiar flutter in her chest, a mix of excitement and apprehension, but beneath it was something new, a quiet steadiness she recognized as growing self-trust. In the hours before the presentation, Emma reviewed every detail meticulously. She had rehearsed her talking points, anticipated questions, and prepared backup materials. Yet no preparation could erase the tension coiling in her stomach. The weight of responsibility pressed on her shoulders, a reminder that confidence was no longer about small, controlled risks, it was about stepping fully into the unknown. As the conference room filled, Emma observed the room's dynamics. Executives spoke confidently, clients asked probing questions, and colleagues navigated the flow of conversation with practiced ease. She felt the instinct to shrink, to blend into the background, but she reminded herself of the lessons she had built over months. Confidence was cultivated through action, reflection, and self-trust. It was forged in deliberate choices under pressure, and today would be the ultimate test. When the moment arrived, Emma stepped forward. Her voice, though carrying a trace of tension, projected clarity and authority. She presented the project not as a flawless vision, but as a carefully constructed plan supported by research, analysis, and strategic reasoning. She allowed pauses for questions, listened actively, and responded with thoughtful precision. Each interaction was a small act of courage, a deliberate exercise in trusting her judgment under scrutiny. During the presentation, unexpected challenges arose. A client questioned a critical assumption, and a technical issue disrupted the slides. The old Emma would have panicked, retreating into self-doubt. Instead, she paused, breathed, and assessed the situation calmly. She acknowledged the concern, presented an alternative approach, and maintained her composure. The tension in the room did not dissipate immediately, but her deliberate response inspired confidence in others. By the end of the meeting, the project had not only survived but gained approval and enthusiastic support. Colleagues congratulated her quietly, clients expressed appreciation for her clarity and adaptability, and Emma felt a surge of quiet exhilaration. She had acted under pressure, faced unforeseen obstacles, and trusted herself enough to navigate them with poise. It was the culmination of months of small risks, deliberate actions, reflection, and resilience. Returning to her desk, Emma allowed herself a rare moment of introspection. The day had tested every aspect of her confidence, her courage to act, her ability to trust herself, her capacity to remain composed under scrutiny, and her skill in influencing and guiding others. She realized that confidence was not static, it was dynamic, responsive, and integrated, growing stronger when applied under pressure. The commute home felt lighter, despite the mental exertion of the day. The city moved around her, vibrant and unpredictable, a mirror to the challenges she had navigated. She noticed courage in its everyday forms, the street vendor negotiating, the cyclist weaving carefully through traffic, a stranger offering assistance to someone in need. Each act was ordinary yet extraordinary, a reminder that courage and confidence were built through repeated, deliberate engagement with life. That night, as Emma prepared for bed, she reflected on the journey that had brought her here. Confidence had begun as small, tentative steps, speaking up in meetings, observing and modeling others, trusting her inner voice. It had evolved into deliberate action under pressure, resilience in the face of setbacks, and leadership through guidance. Today, she realized, had crystallized it, confidence was not a destination but a culmination of continuous, conscious practice. She closed her eyes, feeling a quiet satisfaction that went beyond pride. The high-pressure crucible of the day had confirmed what she already knew: she could act with courage, trust herself under stress, and navigate uncertainty with composure. Confidence, Emma understood, was forged in the moments that mattered most, through action, reflection, and unwavering trust in one's own abilities. Chapter 10: Becoming Herself. The morning sunlight streamed through Emma's apartment window, spilling across the desk where she had been journaling for months. Today felt different, less a beginning or an experiment, more a quiet reckoning. She traced the pages filled with reflections, small victories, mistakes, and lessons learned. Each entry told a story of growth, a narrative stitched together by deliberate action, risk-taking, and a willingness to trust herself. Emma sipped her coffee, savoring the warmth, and reflected on the journey. She remembered the timid woman who had walked into the office months ago, hesitant to speak, unsure of her own voice. She had feared judgment, dreaded mistakes, and retreated from challenges. Now, she felt the quiet presence of someone fundamentally changed. Confidence was no longer a series of borrowed techniques or observed behaviors, it was woven into the fabric of who she had become. Her mind traveled back to the lessons of observation. Watching colleagues navigate their own uncertainties had been invaluable, not as a blueprint to imitate blindly, but as a mirror, reflecting possibilities she had not dared to imagine. She had learned that confidence could be modeled, tested, and internalized through action. Each risk she had taken, no matter how small, had contributed to a growing sense of competence and self-trust. She thought of the days when setbacks had loomed large. The mistakes, the criticism, the moments of doubt, all had seemed insurmountable at the time. Yet those very experiences had forged resilience, teaching her that fear was not a barrier but a signal. Action taken despite discomfort, reflection on outcomes, and the willingness to continue in the face of uncertainty had strengthened her inner foundation. Confidence, she realized, was inseparable from resilience. Emma also reflected on her journey of inner listening. Trusting her instincts had been a turning point. No longer did she wait for external validation before speaking or acting. Instead, she paused, considered, and chose a course aligned with her judgment and values. This self-trust had become the core of her confidence, a compass guiding her through both routine and high-stakes challenges. Leadership and influence had emerged naturally as she embraced her growing confidence. Guiding others, mentoring colleagues, and offering subtle encouragement reinforced her own self-belief. She had learned that confidence was relational, contagious, and amplified through deliberate, authentic action. By lifting others, she had strengthened herself. As the day unfolded, Emma noticed small moments that once would have intimidated her. She spoke up in meetings with calm assurance, made decisions without overanalyzing, and navigated unexpected challenges with measured composure. Fear still appeared, but it no longer dictated her choices. She acted with intention, grounded in the knowledge that confidence was built through practice, reflection, and persistence. Sitting quietly that evening, Emma allowed herself to absorb the full weight of her transformation. She had become a woman capable of deliberate action, resilient in the face of setbacks, and confident in her own judgment. Her voice, once tentative, now carried authority, clarity, and authenticity. She had built confidence not as a borrowed performance, but as an integrated part of her identity. Emma closed her journal and leaned back, smiling softly. The journey was not over, confidence was not a destination, but she now understood its essence. It was a living practice, sustained by courage, reflection, self-trust, and deliberate action. She was no longer defined by fear, hesitation, or doubt. She was Emma, fully herself, capable, resilient, and confident. As night fell, she felt a profound sense of alignment. The timid woman she had once been seemed distant, almost like someone else's story. In her place was someone who had acted despite fear, embraced risk, learned from mistakes, and cultivated resilience. She was no longer waiting for confidence to arrive, she had built it, integrated it, and become it. Chapter 11, The Leap. The morning sun bathed the city in gold as Emma stepped into the office, her heart steady but energized. Today was different, not just another day of challenges or small victories, but a moment that demanded everything she had cultivated: courage, self-trust, resilience, and leadership. A new opportunity awaited, a chance to lead a major initiative with visibility across the company, one that could shape not only her career but her sense of purpose. As she walked through the familiar corridors, Emma reflected on how far she had come. The timid, hesitant woman she once was felt like a distant memory. Fear still arose, as it always would, but it no longer controlled her. Each lesson, speaking up, taking risks, learning from setbacks, trusting her instincts, observing others, and mentoring peers, had converged into a foundation of integrated confidence. Today, she would take the leap. In the morning briefing, Emma presented the proposal she had been developing for weeks. Her voice carried authority and clarity, each point deliberate and grounded in careful preparation. Questions came from every direction, some probing, some challenging, but she responded with poise. She listened actively, adapted gracefully, and incorporated suggestions without losing her own voice. Confidence, she realized, was not the absence of challenge, it was the ability to navigate it with composure and clarity. Later, she met with her new project team. Each member had their own strengths and uncertainties, and Emma drew on her experience of mentoring and leading by example. She empowered them to speak, encouraged risk-taking, and modeled calm decisiveness. By creating a space where confidence could flourish collectively, she amplified not only her own abilities but those of everyone around her. Throughout the day, Emma encountered obstacles, tight deadlines, conflicting opinions, and unexpected technical issues, but she faced each with the same deliberate approach that had brought her this far. Instead of retreating, she paused, assessed, and acted with clarity and intention. Fear was present, but it was a tool, a signal to pay attention, not a command to stop. She had learned that true confidence is inseparable from action, reflection, and trust in oneself. By evening, the initiative was underway, and Emma could see tangible results emerging. Her ideas were being implemented, her guidance followed, and her team responding with initiative and creativity. She felt a quiet exhilaration, not the fleeting thrill of approval, but the deep satisfaction of acting fully, authentically, and courageously. She had built confidence brick by brick, and now it was a living, dynamic force in her life. Walking home as the city lights flickered on, Emma marveled at the journey she had taken. The timid hesitations, the small risks, the mistakes, the moments of self-doubt, they had all been necessary steps. Each one had led to this moment of full engagement, where fear was present but no longer controlling. She understood that confidence was not a destination, but a practice, a skill, and a state of being that could be applied in any context. That night, as she prepared for bed, Emma felt a profound sense of completeness. She had learned to act despite fear, to trust herself, to recover from setbacks, to observe and model, and to lead with authenticity. Confidence was no longer something she sought externally, it was fully hers, embodied and integrated into who she had become. She closed her eyes with a soft smile, aware that the journey would continue in new challenges and opportunities. Yet she was ready. She had built the confidence to face whatever came next with courage, clarity, and self-trust. The leap had been taken, and she had landed firmly, fully herself. Emma drifted to sleep with a sense of quiet triumph. She was no longer defined by hesitation or fear. She was defined by action, resilience, self-trust, and the courage to live fully in her own power. Confidence, she realized, was not about perfection, it was about the willingness to leap, again and again, and to trust that she had everything she needed to soar. Emma's journey reminds us that confidence is not a gift you're born with, it's something you build, step by step, choice by choice. You too can embrace fear, take deliberate action, and trust yourself to grow stronger every day. If you found value in this story, please help the channel grow by subscribing and liking this video, it truly supports us to bring more inspiring stories like this to you. Thank you for listening, and remember, your confidence is waiting to be built, one courageous step at a time.